Now, I want to start on a high note because, following that. So think of your favorite teacher. For some of you, I'm asking you to remember way back. And for others, it was just last semester, right? Think of your favorite teacher. And once you have that good feeling, now I want you to think of the toughest teacher you had. Maybe they're the same teacher. Maybe. Usually not. Now, when I went to seminary, my very first class was one of those tough teachers. The class was the theological ethics of Martin Luther King Jr. And the instructor was Professor Rufus Burroughs. And I never saw that man smile, not one time. And when he preached, he would bang on the podium to make us notice when he was making a point. And we all got it. I mean, we learned more in that class than probably in any other, and every class after that one was easy. He would assign these long papers, 10, 15-page papers with the bibliography and the cover page, and then he would read through our papers 3 times with 3 different colors of ink. He would mark them up with black, he'd mark them with blue, and then he'd mark them with red, and you did not want to get a paper back with a lot of red in it, let me tell you. And because he graded so hard, he offered extra credit. And so I had to do the extra credit because I wanted an A in there, and there's no other way to do that. And even though we learned so much about the civil rights movement and so much about Martin Luther King Jr., I read a book that showed me that I still did not know that much about him. And the book was written by his wife, Coretta Scott King, and she wrote a book called My Life with Martin Luther King Jr. And in that book, she reminds us that he is not only a man, not only the face and the voice and the motivation of the civil rights movement, but he was a pastor. He was a preacher. King took 8 preaching classes in college and seminary. 8. That man could put a message together, and he could deliver it with a cadence, and he made sure that you remembered exactly what he said, and you took something with you when you left. He was a person who loved God, and God was his center. God was his lifeline. God was his motivator when he couldn't go on. And that was what I missed in Dr. Burroughs' class, but I learned from Coretta Scott King's book. And when I wrote those lines in my extra credit paper, Dr. Burroughs underlined them blue ink and said, "Yes!" exclamation point. Always, always remember this about King Judy. His belief in human beings was only possible because of his belief, his faith, and his trust in God. There's one story about King that I tell almost every year, and I'm going to tell it again. It's called the Kitchen Table Experience. And it takes place early in the civil rights movement, 1956. King had been out at meetings all day doing demonstrations. He was exhausted. He gets home late at night. His wife and his baby daughter are already asleep. And he's just ready to crawl into bed when the phone rings. So he answers the phone. And on the other end of the line is this threatening, menacing voice. And that voice said, "You are going to be sorry you ever came to Montgomery." Now, King received threats often, but for some reason, this one really bothered him. And he began to feel afraid, and he could not sleep. So he got up and he went to the kitchen and he made himself a mug of coffee, and he sat at the kitchen table and he held onto that mug. And he knew he could not call on his daddy. He could not ask his mama to help him. He needed to call on the one who saw him and knew him and loved him. And so he sat there with his coffee and he prayed, "Lord, I am down here trying to do what's right. I think I'm right. I believe I am doing the right thing, but I'm afraid now. I'm weak. I'm losing my courage. And if the people see me weak and losing my courage, they are going to become weak and lose their courage too. But I am at the end of my power. I cannot do this alone." And then he felt a voice inside him say, Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness. Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth, and I will be with you till the end of the world. And at that moment, he felt his fear leaving him. And he felt his courage returning, and he knew that as long as God was with him, he could do anything, because God was his center. He talks about his relationship with God in one of his sermons, many of his sermons, but one that is my favorite, which is called The 3 Dimensions of a Complete Life. And he talks about these 3 dimensions that we all must cultivate in our lives to have a full, purposeful life. And those dimensions are, he calls, the length, the breadth, and the height of life. He began with the length. And he said, the length of life is not how long you live. It is nothing to do with how many years you are here, but rather it is how you love yourself, how you have learned to accept yourself. Because King observed that most of us don't like who we are, and we're always trying to be somebody else. And God cannot use somebody who is not authentic, who is not using their own gifts and accepting their own faults and failures and bringing their talents to share with the community. He said, it doesn't matter if you have a PhD or no D, if you're a teacher or a street sweeper, if you are a laborer or a doctor, everybody can pray a prayer that King says that Moses prayed. Lord, I ain't got much, but I is all I got. When we accept ourselves, we embrace the gifts that God gives us, and we can share those gifts with the community. That is the length of life, and we cannot stop there. There's another dimension, and that is the breadth of life. And that is how we love one another, how we stand up for those around us, how we reach out to our community. King said that he is certain there will be many people who stand before God and say, Lord, I had a pretty good life. I went to school, I studied, I had a good job, I had many experiences, and it was pretty good. And God will say to them, but I was hungry, and you fed me not. I was sick, and you did not visit me. I was in jail, and you were unconcerned. Why do we not care for those around us as well as we could? King had an idea. He said that when we see somebody beside us who needs help, our first question is, what will happen to me if I stop to help this person? And he said our response should be, what will happen to this person if I do not help them? I love to share an example about my husband. You don't hear much about him. He's a real person, I promise. We were driving many years ago. It was a bitterly cold day, even worse than today. I don't think the temperature got above 0. The wind chill was minus 30, and there were all those warnings about don't be outside with uncovered skin or you'll have frostbite. We're driving out in the middle of nowhere, and we see a man walking, and he's got a backpack on. And my husband immediately pulls off and offers this man a ride, and he gratefully accepts and gets in the back of our car. And as soon as he got in the car with us, I thought, I wonder what he has in that backpack. What if he has a gun? This guy could shoot us. He could kill us and steal our car. What's going to happen to us? My husband's first thought was, what is going to happen to this man if we drive by and leave him there? Do you see? We need to reach out to our community, and I am totally preaching to the choir here because all of you in this congregation, you are the most giving people I have ever met. You are always looking for ways with our 20-plus missions and ministries to meet the needs of those in our community, and then you're still looking for other ways to do that. What else can we add? Who else can we serve? You understand the breadth of life so very well, and it makes me so proud to be part of this congregation. We understand how to love one another. We are learning how to accept ourselves. But King said we can't stop there because there is a third dimension, one that is often neglected and overlooked. And that third dimension he calls the height of life, and it is reaching up to God in relationship. If it sounds like love God, love your neighbor as yourself, that's because that's what King is talking about. If it sounds like reaching up, reaching in, reaching out, that's what this is about. But this one dimension, reaching up to God, is often neglected. Isaiah talks about it when God says, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is nothing but rules made by men." That hit home for me this week when I read those words again. Our relationship with God is one of the most important parts of our lives. King says that people are made for God, and we will never find rest until we connect with God, until we find God, until we establish that relationship. He told a story often about a woman named Sister Pollard. She was 72 years old during the bus boycott, which went on for over a year, and every single day, Sister Pollard walked to work and walked home. And she was exhausted. And King himself said to her, "You know, just for your health, it would be okay if you rode the bus sometimes." And Sister Pollard famously said, "My feet is tired, but my soul is rested." That's the kind of church that we want to be. The church where, yes, our feet and our hands and our hearts and our backs are tired. There is a lot of work to be done. But our souls are rested because we have cultivated that relationship with God. Now, as I thought about all of these words from King this week, I realized that what was happening during his time and what is happening during ours have some similarities. During King's time, people were protesting. They were in specific places in large numbers, and people with guns were coming after them. They were being shot. They were being put in jail. They were being fire hosed. Dogs were set on them. They were being lynched. And the rest of the country was looking on in horror, saying, "When are we going to learn that we don't need to use violence, especially not on one another? When is this going to stop? How can we sit by and watch this happen?" And that made me think, of course, of Minnesota, which has been in the news all week, 10 days now, where there is violence erupting, and more people with guns are being sent to a place that was perfectly peaceful before they arrived. And yet, when I look at some of the videos that are being circulated on social media, there are people sledding on their way to get to the protests in Minnesota. There are people dressing up in funny costumes like they do in Portland. There are people with great joy who are standing arm in arm, side by side for one another. And the rest of us are looking on and thinking, what can we do? Well, the first thing we have to make sure that we do is that we don't lose hope. Always remember this about King, Judy. His belief in human beings was only possible because of his belief, his faith, and his trust in God. We've got to develop those three dimensions so that we can keep believing in human beings. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I hear some news and I think, God should probably just let us all kill each other. You know, if we're just going to keep acting like this, where is the good? Well, if we're thinking that way, we're not looking at all the dimensions of a complete life. Something there is missing. And for me, it was my faith in God. I began to look for people to do all the work. And all I really needed to do for a little while was quiet my heart and focus on God and allow God to restore my faith in human beings. And now I feel ready. I can go hold a sign and I can call my congresspeople and I can do the things I need to do because that hope has been restored. So King's words from 70 years ago are just as impactful today. So I want you to think about that third dimension, the height of life. God was King's center. God was what kept King going when the going got really, really tough. What is ours? What is yours? What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? What is it that keeps you going even when things sound terrible? What is it that restores your hope in human beings? Think about that for a moment. What is your center?